Madison wanted a mulligan for her day, or a few shots of tequila, whichever would take the profound shock away. Andrew declared his parentage. Madison had saved a woman by using her body as a puppet, her favorite car destroyed, and every time she blinked, she found herself haunted by a pair of brown eyes. Perhaps not a complete do-over, but for the parts she didn't want to deal with. Like waking up with a concussion, definitely part of the do-over. Her car becoming a contender in a private demolition derby she hadn't been invited to needed to be redone. Everything Andrew said from the moment they pulled into the drive would be better forgotten than done over. He couldn't be her father. She already had one. The man who helped raise her might be easily flustered and an incompetent parent, but he was still the man she called Dad. One doesn't decide after childhood ended to change parents. The rapid anti-aging thing? Well, that couldn't be explained. He claimed to be an angel. Andrew didn't even have wings. What kind of celestial being had no billowing cloud of white feathers? The doorbell rang and the sound jolted Madison from her musing. She almost called out Andrew's name to answer it because she didn't feel like moving. She'd write to her mother and ask her to send over someone to do the work around the house that Andrew used to do for her. Until she sorted out what had become her life, she'd never remember the mundane things such as picking up her dry cleaning. She could use someone to point her in the right direction of a mechanic, which would help also. As she walked to the foyer, she stopped at the mirror and smoothed a few wayward strands of hair. She'd already met one good man and an angel. Best to not offend some other mythical creature knocking on her door. Though she assumed her guest was Kennedy, with the kind of day she'd had, better not to jump to conclusions. Her flamboyant cousin stood in the doorway with a wild, flowing skirt speckled with every color of the rainbow. Her black and green corset would have been a throwback from every era it appeared in. Her hair had flowers sewn in the hundreds of tiny braids which fell past her shoulders. On every area of her body that could hold them, Kennedy jangled beads. At least 6 strands of various colors hung around her neck. Both wrists were covered in beaded bangles, and she even wrapped them around her waist. Kennedy always made Madison smile. Without a word said between them, the two women embraced. The day dissipated against the love which flowed from her cousin's arms and filled Madison's heart one beat at a time. Tears sprung in her eyes, and she made no attempt to stem their flow. They ran down her cheeks, one after the other, until they pooled on Kennedy's shoulder.
"Well, I need a towel, and you need a tissue,"
Kennedy said after a moment. Madison smiled and stood aside for Kennedy to walk in.
"Did you make coffee?"
Kennedy asked. Yes, though I can't attest to how fresh. Same as when you were last here.
Only about 6 weeks old. I can live with that.
Madison adored her cousin for the questions she didn't ask. Kennedy would wait until Madison was able to get the words out, and then after they were, she turned into a pit bull until she exhausted every bit of information. Andrew told me he was my father. Madison blurted out.
Oh, thank God. If you carried Radcliffe's genes, can you imagine what your children would look like?
She laughed a little.
Though, wow, your mother sure robbed the grave with him.
The thought of her mother with anyone made her want to cringe, but the 70-year-old version of Andrew refused to form in her mind. It was too absurd. The dreams are changing. I actually saved a woman today. Madison never could tell if Kennedy believed her about the dreams, or if she thought Madison was as crazy as everyone else in their family did.
Wow, new father, new dreams. I'm not sure what the waterworks are for.
My car is trashed, Madison offered.
So, by the dealership,
Kennedy countered. Everything weird that occurred today happened in front of the first guy I looked twice at in a decade. Whoa, where did that come from?
a guy? Holy shit, you are interested in a guy? I couldn't decide if you were completely non-sexual or a lesbian still in the closet.
Madison's mouth fell open and she gaped at her cousin. You thought I was a lesbian?
Well, it's not as though you ever talked about a guy since Bobby Armstrong in the 10th grade.
Kennedy walked over to the cupboard and pulled out 2 mugs and poured them both a cup of coffee. She added 3 teaspoons of sugar and an equal amount of powdered creamer to hers.
Yuck. Would you like some coffee with your junk?
Kennedy teased.
Now, spill it. What's his name? Where did you meet him?
The words poured out of her mouth as she regaled Kennedy with her day. Knowing she had someone in her life to share her abnormalities with had saved her sanity. It lifted her spirits to acknowledge she wasn't alone in the world. Brian had also said she wasn't alone. Though he added to her internal struggles, she'd never regret meeting him.
You sure he didn't take a bat to your car?
Madison took a sip of her sweet, hot drink before she answered. It never once occurred to me to think he damaged my car. I don't know what it is about him, but he's the most non-threatening person I've ever met. He doesn't waste words, goes straight to the heart of things, and doesn't get fazed by things most would find out of the ordinary.
Well, I'll reserve judgment until I meet him. When will you see him again?
Probably never after the way she kicked him out of there. Even as the thought flittered through her mind, she cast the fear aside. Brian would come back, or call her, or find some way to see her again.
I'm a little confused on one small part.
Kennedy said. Just one?
If Andrew is an angel, does that make you part angel? Could that be the reason you have those dreams? I spent years trying to find information on how to help you with them. The only thing I could ever find that had any shred of reality was an old tome that spoke of a race of dream hunters.
You researched my dreams? Madison couldn't have been more shocked if Kennedy had spouted two heads in front of her.
My entire college thesis was on dream portals and other dream phenomenon. Get with the program. Who do you think sent you all those books and stones?
What books and stones? Then it became Kennedy's turn to stare at Madison as if she spouted two heads.
Maddie, for the past 6 years I've been sending you information, lore, legends, and rocks that were supposed to have mythical properties.
What are you talking about? You've only been back in the States since June.
I knew your parents didn't like me, but I never thought they'd go as far as block stuff that could potentially help you.
I've lived here alone for a while now, so it couldn't have been my parents.
Your mom had me send everything to a P.O. box so the mailman wouldn't gossip about your condition with the neighbors.
Tears sprung to her eyes once more as she thought of how blessed she was with a cousin like the one sitting beside her. Here she'd wondered whether Kennedy even believed her about the dreams, and the other woman had dedicated her entire education to finding out how to help her. Madison would get to the bottom of why her mother never let the packages get to her.
Your eyes are leaking again. So, we'll say all of it got lost in the mail and some guy at the post office has a cool collection of books and rocks. You got me, and I have all the information up here.
Kennedy tapped her head. So, what do you think of a cousin who dreams of real-life events and is probably part angel?
Depends. What do you think of a cousin who gets the answers to most of her questions from a magic 8-ball?
A bark of laughter burst through Madison. She laughed so hard, tears ran down her face.
God, woman, even when you laugh, you cry.
Kennedy exclaimed. Her words only made Madison laugh harder. Kennedy joined in, and soon the two of them wiped eyes and held their sides from laughter. They carried their caffeine-fueled giggle fest into the living room where they caught up on the things they'd missed in each other's lives. The simple friendship with her cousin proved to be the bandage Madison needed to fix her day. A sudden crash caused both women to jump and look in the direction of the front picture window. Madison yelped as a rock landed in the center of the floor.
What the hell?
Kennedy exclaimed. Madison walked over to the rock and noticed something wrapped around it.
Careful. What if someone covered it in acid or something?
Kennedy warned. Acid? You watch far too much sci-fi. Madison picked it up and pulled out the rolled-up tube of paper which had been attached with a string in a crude knot. When she unrolled the paper, her hand flew to her mouth. The paper turned out to be a photograph of a woman, bound and gagged, sitting on a dirty, uncovered mattress. This one will experience her death threefold, and then I'm coming for you. The black letters on the picture obliterated any sense of peace the laughter gave Madison.